So good evening, everyone. Welcome to Eastern Ontario Correctional Complex Continuing Public Engagement. My name is Daniel Archambault, and I will be the facilitator for this evening's engagement session. I am part of the Innovation 7 team. So Innovation 7 is an Indigenous-owned management consulting firm that builds reconciliation-focused partnerships with clients across all business sectors. Indigenous culture, knowledge, and socioeconomic interests are woven into everything we do. Innovation 7 supports its clients in engagement and consultation, training and development, reconciliation advisory, program evaluation, project management and implementation, and Indigenous recruitment. I would like to start off by completing a land acknowledgement. So usually when we do a land acknowledgement, we do it in a physical place where we gather. However, in the spirit of the transitioning to the new normal that COVID has created, and because we're located in many different parts of Ontario, I wish to acknowledge the traditional territory upon which the proposed project will be built. So we recognize that the proposed project in Kemptville is located on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We extend our respect to all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples for their valuable past and present contributions to this land. We also recognize and respect the cultural diversity that First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people bring to the city of Kemptville. So today we're using Zoom as a virtual engagement tool. All participants have been muted and will be unmuted by the host for the question and answer period at the end. By hovering your mouse over the top of your screen, you will see view options. Click this button to change your view, for example, exit full screen, side-by-side mode, etc. Please try to resolve any IT issues you may be having on your own using Zoom FAQ. We will put the link in the chat. And SolGen has made available a technical support number that can be reached at the two numbers that are shown here, 343-801-3088. Or 343-805-0810, and someone will be able to help you if you're having any issues. In terms of expected conduct, everyone is expected to conduct themselves in a respectful and appropriate manner. Participants who conduct themselves in a disruptive or inappropriate manner, either coarse language, disrespectful comments, will be muted and will receive one warning. Continued inappropriate behavior could result in the facilitator muting the individual, moving on to another participant, or in a worst case scenario, expulsion from the engagement session. This session and related materials will be presented in English. Toutefois, si vous désirez fournir vos commentaires ou poser vos questions en français, il me fera plaisir de les traduire pour notre panel et de traduire leurs réponses pour vous si nécessaire. So in terms of technology, when we get to the Q&A session, if you're on the phone, you will press *9. That will indicate that you have a question, and that will raise your hand. I will call upon you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. There is a limit of 1 question per person. If you have a follow-up question, please re-enter the queue. If we receive multiple questions on a specific subject, in order to ensure that we get to hear and answer as many questions as possible, we may consolidate similar questions into one question. And it is important that you introduce yourself when you are asking a question verbally. The chat function will be enabled at the start of the Q&A session. Send your questions, comments to the individual identified in the chat as questions host. This individual can be selected from the drop-down menu above the chat box. Type your question, comment in the chat box and hit enter to send it to the host. Or raise your hand on Zoom to ask questions or provide comments verbally. Again, there will be a limit of 1 question per person. Our goal today is to summarize what we heard at the last engagement session, provide an overview of the current vision of the new Eastern Ontario Correctional Complex, review project timelines, allow for a Q&A session, and continue the engagement journey. We will achieve that by following the agenda for this engagement session. I will invite Ali Veshkini to do opening remarks and the panel to introduce themselves. After that, we'll work through a project update, what we heard and progress to date. We'll talk about community impact and economic benefits. We'll look at project timelines. And then at the end, we will have the Q&A session. So at this time, I would like to invite the members of the panel to introduce themselves. And after that, Ali Veshkini will provide opening remarks.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you, I7, for helping to facilitate the session. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'll give my opening remarks in a second, but I'm Ali Veshkini. I'm the executive in charge of this project and Associate Deputy Minister at the Ministry of Solicitor General. Maria?
Thanks, Ali. I'm Maria Duran-Schneider. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer and Assistant Deputy Minister of the Corporate Services Division at the Ministry of Solicitor General.
Hi, everybody. I'm Daryl Pitfield, Assistant Minister of Municipal Services for Solicitor General. I oversee all 25 facilities across Ontario. I'm very pleased to be here tonight to talk to you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Angelo Gismondi, Senior Vice President at Infrastructure Ontario, and I'm responsible for the Justice Portfolio, which is, of course, SolGen Ministry and the Ministry of the Attorney General.
Thank you, Ali. If you want to move to opening remarks.
Absolutely. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, everyone, for introducing ourselves. So, again, appreciate everyone being here tonight. I know it's in the evening, but I appreciate everyone making the time to be here. Really, this is continuing our journey in terms of engagement and transparency, and those two pieces in terms of engagement and transparency have been very important for our Minister Clark, our Minister Jones, and Mayor Peckford as well, so that we continue with these engagements. Again, the last engagement we had never done that kind of engagement before when we're constructing in our portfolio. And so again, this is something that's novel for us in terms of doing two engagements with the public, but this is a very important topic and we definitely want to hear from you. And so that's why we're engaging again. So the last time we were here, we talked about a lot of important topics. We talked about site selection, we talked about placement of the facility, we talked about our modernization agenda, we talked about safety and security, talked about community discharge and how we would feel in the community if people are going to be, discharged into the community or not. And obviously we presented about how we always make sure that we take people back home to their communities, and we talked about timelines as well. One piece that I just want to revisit very, very quickly is just the site selection process. Now, in terms of site selection, in terms of how we selected this, the same things that were said at the last meeting still hold true today in terms of why we selected. It was based on size, adjacency to highway, and being close to servicing, meaning we can expand services versus having to create net new servicing. It was, our government directive dictates that we must go to government lands so that we're not buying private sector or commercial lands. And obviously this is a government land. Also that it's zoned institutional. It's already zoned for the purpose that we need it for, meaning it's not zoned as residential, it's not zoned as agricultural, but it's zoned as institutional, so it allows us to start using it. And lastly, there are no land claims on this land, meaning there's no dedicated land claims, indigenous or otherwise, on this piece of property. And so it allows us to continue to build. That is really the reason why we did that site selection and why we chose this property, because it had all those elements on it. Now, in terms of post our meeting, so we talked about all those things at our last meeting. After that meeting, over the last year, we've done obviously a few things. You're going to hear about a lot of them today, but we also met with other partners and with other stakeholders as well. We met with the school boards, French and English, that are in your community. We met with the hospital CEO and one of their board members. We've met with city officials as well, and we met with Indigenous partners. Overall, those meetings over the last year have gone generally good. There are obviously initial discussions, so we're going to be continuing to talk to those people more, especially in 2020. But there were initial discussions. There was no major concerns that were brought forward. Obviously, there were items that were very important to each one of those stakeholders that they want to work with us, whether if it's the land development, whether if it's making sure we have the right buffering, whether if it's make sure that we understand, the drain on potential services with the hospital, or having a good symbiotic relationship with the hospital. But there wasn't anything that was major in terms of impacts that were brought up. So that was a good sign in terms of continuing to engage with those partners, bringing them along, and actually, not treating them as stakeholders, but actually true partners. So that's what we did over the last year. So in terms of today, what we want to talk to you about, and Daniel brought it up, but I want to give some color to it, is we want to discuss a few items that you brought up last time, and then obviously give you some updates on the project as well in terms of where we're going. What we heard last time was, obviously a lot of concern in terms of the privacy and sight lines of the facility and the buffering. We also heard about the site and the impacts of the land. One citizen talked about, that he walks along the trails and he wants to know, what is it going to look like? Are you getting rid of the trail that I walk every day? So we obviously heard about that, and we're here to talk to you about that today as well. We also heard about the excess lands and what are we doing with the lands abutting, and are we going to be holding those lands or not? And then obviously the community impacts. We heard a lot last time about the potential impact on the hospital. We talked about the lack of social services in the community as well. And so today we want to talk about that. So we want to take some of the topics that we heard last time, bring them forward to today, because we have better answers for them, because in terms of time and planning, we've moved forward, so we can provide you with answers that are more fulsome than we did at really the onset of this project. And then obviously, as I said, the second piece is we want to talk to you about some of the other aspects of the project in terms of timelines and partnerships as well. So that's it, Daniel. So that's it for the introduction. So if we can move forward with the agenda.
Go ahead. So who, Ali, I believe, or Maria, you're up.
Yeah. I can start. So on this slide, collaboration across the sectors. We know that many people who become involved with the criminal justice sector are already impacted by the challenges related to stable housing, literacy, trauma, mental health, and addiction. That's why we're taking an integrated approach to justice sector transformation, and why partnerships across the justice sector, including policing, prosecution, defense counsel, and the courts, as well as with other sectors and with communities, why they're also critical to achieving this vision. This includes the social sector, health, housing, education, social service systems, and the justice sector, police, courts, and corrections, to strengthen prevention by addressing underlying social needs, and to improve outcomes by expanding community-based supports to help people who have become engaged in the criminal justice system, to help them get access to services that address some of these underlying causes that have resulted in a criminal charge. More examples of this integrated approach are initiatives designed to support accused people to remain in their home community while their criminal case is being resolved, rather than being held in custody. This can also include bail bed programs that support the release for people who are experiencing homelessness, and bail verification and supervision programs to provide additional support to people who may need assistance complying with the release conditions while they remain in their community. This type of integration is a key part of improving outcomes for people and their communities. And our plan for criminal justice sector transformation really has three main areas of focus. First, it's about reducing the number of individuals coming into custody through targeted interventions and by addressing the root causes of crime. For example, at the ministry, we've introduced new legislative requirements related to community safety and well-being planning that encourages collaborative approaches to proactively identify and address local priority risks in the community before they escalate and into situations of crisis. A second area of focus includes using innovative tools and technology to improve integration and accessibility across the system, so from the police to courts to corrections. And an example of this includes shifting to a virtual court model to allow for court appearances for in-custody accused individuals without the need to have them transport in and out of a correctional facility. The final area of focus for the justice transformation is renovating outdated infrastructure and building new correctional facilities, leading us to a path of economic recovery for local communities. This includes several projects that the province is doing right now, such as building a new correctional center in Thunder Bay, replacing the Brockville jail with a newer facility, and of course building a new correctional complex in Kemptville. If we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. The construction of this state-of-the-art institution will meet our need or exceed the industry standards of a correctional facility, and it's projected to house about 235 beds. The bed count will allow us to respond to regional trends in inmate count for the next few years, and also help us address current capacity pressures throughout the eastern region. The complex will house both men and women inmates, remanded and sentenced at all security levels, but primarily those classified as minimum and enhanced. The new facility will also focus on enhanced programming geared toward improving rehabilitation, reducing the risk of reoffending. Our goal really is to have the inmates in our custody return to their communities better equipped to reintegrate into society. We aim to achieve this goal by improving the overall environment for those in our custody and care, compared with the harsher correctional practices of the past that were not designed to promote rehabilitation. A modern facility will also enable the frontline staff to do their jobs safely and effectively. For example, a simple design feature such as the addition of green space in any correctional setting provides a therapeutic space for both inmates, staff, and potentially even visitors. The late Nelson Mandela once stated, "It is said that no one truly knows a nation until one has been inside its jails. A nation should not be judged by how it treats its highest citizens, but its slowest ones." The Mandela Rules for the Treatment of Prisoners is an internationally recognized set of guidelines that have assisted in shaping correctional reform. Our dated infrastructure was created with a less progressive mindset, focusing on warehousing rather than rehabilitation. The new institutions are an opportunity for us to focus design and programming efforts on reducing recidivism.
Thank you, Maria. So in terms of project updates, we're going to look at 4 key questions. So what is the government doing to ensure community safety? What are the security elements within the building? What is the plan for reintegration and releasing to the community? And how will the government get key partners who don't currently operate in Kemptville? So I'd like to invite Daryl Pitfield to provide an update on the project and answers to these questions. Daryl?
Great, thank you, Daniel. Thank you, introduction. Yes, everybody. I know there's a lot of concerns about building a new building in your area, but I want to lay some of those fears and tell you we've done this before. Several facilities under our care right now, like Thunder Bay Jail, Ontario Correctional Institute in Brantford, as well as North Bay Jail, all abut into residential areas with no issues amongst them, even with areas of both elementary and secondary schools. I think it's very important to notice that. We see right now that our ability to help the highest standards, high security levels, including secure perimeter fences around the institution, the most up-to-date modern technology security in those areas. We want to make sure that is the utmost problem of safety in our area. We make sure safety is paramount for you in the community, as well as the offenders in our care and custody. Right now, inmates can only leave the building for only 4 reasons. Institution, transporting back and forth in a secure vehicle by trained correctional officers. If for emergency health care, they leave the building to go to the hospital with trained community escort officers, not multiple officers taking them out of the building. Also for court, trained with correctional officers or police officers, municipality, bring them back and forth to court areas. Those are the issues where they leave the institution. We also have the provincial security assessment tool called SAFER, which is meant to tell individuals of their classification of institutions to ensure they're put in the right area, to make sure that the proper classification, whether medium, max, and minimum is done. And the correctional institutions at Kemptville are those for more medium security, rehabilitated issues, moving forward to make sure they're entering the community and moving outwards. Also, as well, I can tell you other institutions similar to this, like Central North Correctional Center, when an individual is released from custody, the ministry is bound to release them to their home institution or where they were first charged for their primary custody for. With that in mind, areas like Central North provide a 45-minute bus ride to Barrie to make sure they have a bus to their home community. Plus, as well, we also transport people back to their home communities prior to discharge to ensure they get back, to facilitate reintegration back to their communities. Next slide, please. Community integration is something we're doing all along, but now we have honed our skill in this situation. Helping offenders transition back into custody, from custody into their home communities. We have residential agreements with different areas. We've worked with First Nations groups. We've worked with the communities, EFRI, John Howard, different areas, to ensure these people have the proper tools when they leave the institution, housing, supports, mental health concerns going back and forth. We ensure that coaching programs inside the institution, Indigenous programs, Islamic programs, that are assessed and put forward by our program areas within the institutions and the ministry for those in our care and custody. A lot of these are done through our local probation and parole officers who assist in the integration process. They work hand in hand with clients across the province to ensure proper placement of these offenders. Often these community service oriented offenders are asked that individuals take the time to serve some community service hours in the community where their crimes are committed. Community service hours, something akin to helping on the community service hours. And I think that's something we're very keen on and we're utilizing with our partners in community services. Program, core areas, we look at domestic violence, anger management, substance abuse. We target on key areas of people that are vulnerable populations to make sure the proper programs are there, help them go back into society. Next slide, please. Reintegration support. What we're offering the community. We work with our community partners on a regular basis, particular areas such as EFRI, John Howard, community partners. We work with moms in different areas to make sure we talk to those stakeholders through our program people. We have discharge planners, rehabilitation officers, social workers, psychologists, healthcare. For healthcare people, we reach out to individuals who have their community doctors and they assist people. Substance abuse, dependency issues, we make sure those issues are dealt with to the fullest extent for an offender that leaves our custody. Plans are made when they first walk in the building to see what's going to be out. They're okay to walk in the building and assess his condition coming in the door and making a plan before he leaves. He has the best, utmost care walking out that door before his society. EFRI can help us in different areas and will engage those partners coming through. They have residential programs, housing support services, court and prison in-reach. We've worked for many years. In my career, over 35 years in corrections, I've worked closely with both EFRI and John Howard at many levels, locally, provincially, and all across the institutions in our Ontario. John Howard offers many programs, build bridges to different areas. We've had programs, we've had emergency housing resources. People put up with schooling, education to move them forward. Policies and programs, educational material for incarcerated individuals. We want to make sure they're there for everybody. And we'll ensure that as we're moving through this process, that we're closer to design time, we'll make sure there's dedicated space and institutions for these programs to take place. And when there's not designated space or appropriate areas for them, we'll make sure there's virtual areas they can log into and the inmates can see that for those proper programs in their custody time. And secondarily, near the end of our time we're building the institution, we'll have sure these service groups are offered tours of the institution to make sure they can offer input and insight into the best way to deliver these programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. In terms of design and land use, 3 questions came up from the last engagement session. So what will visibility be like from outside and within the institution? Can the community utilize the excess land on site? And will the lands be used for the international plowing match in 2022? I'd like to invite Ali Lishkini to provide an update on design features and land use and answer these questions.
Thank you, Daniel. So hopefully from you saw what the last 2 presenters, Daryl and Maria, is that, we said this the last time we met and it still stays true today, is we're really trying to turn a chapter in corrections, and we're trying to move to that rehabilitative model. We're trying to move to that normalized model, and we're trying to make people better, get them back into their communities and support them so that they're positive citizens in whatever community that they came from. What we wanted to show you on this slide is just the upper part is what a normal living condition day room will look like. This will be one of a kind because the facility in Ontario, Thunder Bay, will also mimic this as well, but those 2 will be one of a kind in Ontario and across Canada, in that people will have their own dedicated living space, meaning you'll have your own room, just like you would at potentially college or if you went to camp. So they'll have their own dedicated room that is theirs. And then once they step out of that room, they're going to be stepping into this environment, which is a very open environment. People can move around freely. People can interact. And as you can see, the sight line moving outwards, where the windows are, obviously there's a lot of natural light in windows. The first sight line is going to be other places or other aspects of the actual facility. So when we talk about being open and airy, that first sight line that people are going to be able to see is actually just, obviously they're going to be able to see outside, but our clients or inmates are going to be able to see just another piece of the infrastructure really. Down at the bottom is really a depiction about the sight line once you're looking at it from the street view. So you can see that we've shaded in where, trees, and really when you're walking by the facility, we shaded in kind of the trees just so you can see the facility still, but that's what it will look like. You really won't be able to see, especially after a few years, once the foliage is full, you won't really be able to see the facility from that street view. And so we just wanted to give you a visual representation of what it potentially could look like from the street. Now, just to get a little more granular, if we can move to the next slide. We already talked about last session about what the building is actually going to look like in terms of being very modern. It won't look like a correctional facility, or more look like potentially a modern college or a modern hospital. But we talked a lot about the buffering, and we talked a little about where the facility will be placed. So if I can orient you, the facility is actually in the middle, in the gray area. That's generally the footprint that it'll require. As you can see, we've worked with our technical people and with the city to look and see how we can fit it furthest back onto the property. So as you can see, it's really abutting. It's really abutting the 416 and the highway, and you can see in the blue. So there's a blue L on the west and southern corridor. We've been working with the city and having the discussion. This is really the buffer zone that we want to create. The buffer zone will be about anywhere from 1 to 2 football fields in length. And that buffer zone, and I'll talk about it in a second, we really want to make it a space where it's a collaborative space, where we're utilizing it for the community. The community is utilizing it in the manner that they want. So as you can see, the buffer zone being 1 to 2 football fields, and we still then have space until we get to the gray zone, which will be our facility. And so we still have a lot of property until you come to our property line where we'll have the facility. There will be some buildings that will have to be torn down that no one is using right now, but one discussion that we're also having is the equestrian building. We know that that's very important for the community, so we're having discussions transparently about is it feasibility to move it, into that blue zone fully, or potentially a reconstruction, or if not, if none of that's feasible, just trying to do something in that blue zone that allows us to represent the historical significance of that equestrian building and of the site in general as well. So that's in terms of building. When you move to the south, which is the red, so you see the red shaded area, that's really where, and I'll talk about it a little more, where we're working with the municipality to talk about how they can utilize those lands to the south to help the community and bolster it. So we just wanted to talk again, because this was a big discussion about how far the property line will go, what is the buffering, what it will look like, how far are the setbacks, how close we'll be able to see it from the various residential areas. So hopefully this gives you a really good depiction of where it'd be suited, or where it'd be situated, and then how much buffer zone we actually have. Okay, next slide. So in terms of the land access and local initiatives, obviously we recognize that Kemptville is a very agricultural, very green, very green city. And so the land access, so the blue area, the L that we spoke about, we want to make sure that we work with the city to actually come to an agreement. Rather, we're looking at transferring those lands or providing a right of use for a very extended period of time, in perpetuity almost, so that land the city can use and plan that L area in whatever manner, in greening or agricultural, that they want. We want that space to be a good, vibrant space. We want that space to be used, for something that the city and the municipality really wants and the citizens really want. So we're happy to work with you to see how we can help you utilize that land and to make sure that you have access and rights to that land, so that you can, in the future, use it for any purposes, greening or agricultural, that you need. That'll actually create even more buffering once that happens. But as I said, in the picture that we showed 2 slides before, there will already be natural buffering that we'll do with greenery and trees anyway for our facility, but that L space, that blue space, will really help to enhance any kind of future greening for agriculture and innovative things that the municipality wants to do. Next slide. Also, the intermowing plowing match, we were working collaboratively with the committee that oversees this. We are talking to them about, we obviously started doing testing on site, which we do with any infrastructure project in terms of geological and environmental assessments. Obviously, that turned up the soil. We've been working with the committee there to level the field. We were there last week to look at that, how that leveling looks. So the field is leveled again, and we're going to be reseeding it so that we can ensure that the city and the municipality have a very successful plowing match in 2020. So we're happy to allow it to happen, but not just allow it to happen, to actually help reseed and make sure that it's sustainable and that we have a good event. Next slide. So just before we get into the next slide, one thing that I didn't talk about, sorry, is the red space. So the red space that I alluded to before, that's on the southern part of the property. What we actually want to do is work collaboratively with municipality to see, and government services, because we don't own that land as well in the red, how we can actually help to transfer that land into the municipal portfolio. So that way, as a good partner, we are not just holding on to lands as any government entity that's not being used, but we're helping actually to partner and get that land transferred to that municipality, so that the municipality will not only be allowed to use that L portion, but also that red portion as well as they deem fit, because we want that to be transferred. So in terms of municipal services, we heard about that a lot. So if we can just go to the next slide. We have been working with city officials. We need to increase that collaboration, because obviously the city is modernizing and expanding their services and their sewage and water treatment. And what we heard last week from city officials is we need to accelerate kind of our work as well, so that we can give you definitively what our needs will be, within a band, obviously, within a spectrum of plus minus, but that's what we're doing, so that we can ensure that as you are increasing and doing your studies for increasing your sewage and water treatment, that we are providing the information that you need, so that they can be symbiotic. So as they're expanding, that the expansion can accommodate what we need, and obviously we will pay for everything that any expansion that is done for us. We are paying for all of that. It will not be a download to the citizens or to the city, and we're also going to be helping with the design features as well. So we're paying for the design, and we're paying for the expansion of that.
Thank you, Ali. So a few questions came up around the new facilities impact on the capacity within existing medical institutions. So I'll ask Daryl to provide an update on the medical facilities.
Thanks, Daniel. We understand the concerns raised with demand of local hospitals and not decrease of, but I want to tell you right now, most of our facilities are built to be totally self-sufficient as much as possible. Essential service provided on site to reduce impact, reliance on the surrounding community, including the need for escorts in the community. Local community partners are important with hospitals and other health and social providers. They're critical to being able to provide safe and appropriate care in their institutions, but also facilitate continuity of care and safe transitions back to the community. While the majority of healthcare service can be delivered on site, particularly newer facilities where we have infirmaries, and on this project we have an increased number of infirmary beds in the institution, for patients who require acute care, such as a life-threatening event or surgery, are sent to local hospital for security escorts with correctional officers. Close implementation, we will work with the local hospitals and the regional Ontario health team to determine the appropriate protocols and process with respect to the admittance of inmates in the new facility. We're committed to providing high-quality primary care and mental health care service to our inmate population. Over the past 2 years, we've been modernizing our healthcare services, including the design of the physical space for the service to provide inmates. Physicians and nurse practitioners provide primary care in provincial correctional facilities. All our facilities have registered nurses on staff, provide majority of healthcare services, and collaborate with other healthcare providers in the building. Your facilities have pharmacists, pharmacy techs, as well as space to accommodate limited dental and optometry services. All of our institutions have access to Ontario Telemedicine Network, OTN, which allows us to virtually connect patients with off-site specialty care as much as possible. Mental health nurses, psychologists, and social workers and addiction counselors to provide care to our inmates. We also ensure that all of our facilities have access to a psychiatrist at all times. Over the past couple of years, we've expanded specialty mental health and addiction supports to provide inmates on site, while also ensuring that the patients who need advanced care provide that care in hospitals. For example, last December, we announced the 5 acute care stabilization beds at Ontario Shores, which are dedicated to female inmates with acute mental health needs at Band-Aid Center for Women. Thank you.
Dan, you're on mute.
Thank you, Daryl. Sorry about that, folks. So I'll invite Angelo Gismondi to give us an update on the economic benefits that will be realized at the local level.
Thanks, Daniel. The government of Ontario has been investing in critical infrastructure for the people of Ontario. There's currently a pipeline in the order of magnitude of $60 billion, including civil infrastructure. This is particularly important in this unprecedented COVID time, as infrastructure development will play a key role in the economic recovery. However, the job creation does not stop with the construction phase. Upon completion, it's expected that the facility will have north of 300 total staff, and on any given day, there could be upwards of 150 staff, volunteers, and professionals working in the building, creating quality long-term jobs. In addition, buying local meals, hospitality, etc., will benefit from the increased demand. The new Eastern Ontario Correctional Complex will bolster existing businesses and create new economic opportunities for the local community. Local businesses that will benefit include restaurants, coffee shops, grocery stores, convenience stores, daycare facilities, and gas stations. Local tradespeople may be contracted to do work during the build phase of the new facility. And after it is built, local companies may be engaged to provide maintenance services such as snow removal. Once built, the facility will provide well-paying government jobs in positions such as correctional staff, healthcare, kitchen staff, and administration. As staff are hired for the new facility, local housing may become desirable for staff who do not want to commute to work. This may be an added benefit for local businesses and real estate. It's important to note that the communities in which these projects are built typically benefit directly and indirectly, supporting and creating jobs through sourcing labor and materials from surrounding communities. For example, on projects such as Thunder Bay and Kenora modular build facilities, approximately 80% of subcontractors are local to Thunder Bay.
Thank you, Angelo. And in terms of other impacts of the community, I'd like to invite Daryl to provide an update on this.
Thank you. Design of the new facility will prioritize safety, normalization, rehabilitation, plus minimizing any form of incidents that require police intervention to the best of our ability. The new Eastern Correctional Facility provides for single-cell accommodation, which is not the norm amongst the rest of the province. And we find single-cell accommodation leaves less time for interaction with offenders, whether in violence or things of aggression or assault going forward. Be multiple levels of security, both static and dynamic in the institution, as well as correctional officers, surveillance, and electronic means to watch inmates at all times to avoid less and less incidents going forward. Inmates coming into the facility will be assessed and classified according to a risk-based triage service model and housed in their appropriate security unit. Design of these units will align with security classification of the institution itself. The Ministry is planning a policy review funding model for calls for service from local police institutions at this time. We have some historical data for the number of police calls for service at the Quinte Detention Center. The calls for service throughout the year was only between 50 and 100 calls. We believe these calls for service can be further reduced given the mitigation strategy outlined above. Keeping in mind that Quinte is a bigger institution, does not have single-cell accommodation, inmates are not classified as housed according to security classification. Next slide, please. Sorry, everybody. Police services are responsible for court security and to transporting inmates to and from court appearances. Under the Court Security and Prisoner Transportation Program, the ministry allocates funding to municipalities to offset costs associated with both court security and inmate transportation to and from the courts. As the project moves to the design process, the engagement with stakeholders such as police service to iron out all these details as we move forward to the completion of the project. As part of an ongoing effort to modernize the criminal justice system, we increased use of our video court suite, which increased virtual court attendance, reduced inmate movement outside the institution. The COVID-19 pandemic compelled the government to find alternative uses and leverage technology. As such, close to 100% of all pre-trials are done virtually at this point. And I can say that the institutions, over the course of 1 year, did over 270,000 virtual appearances within inmates in custody instead of going to court, keeping them within the institution itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. I'd like to invite Angelo to provide an update on the project timelines.
So the project lifecycle is comprised of 3 phases: planning, design and construction, and the operational phase. The planning phase, which started in 2020, will go to 2024. And it includes site investigation and due diligence activities, started last year, engagement of the planning and design consultants, they are on board and working, development of design guidelines and performance specifications, followed by requests for qualifications, which will occur next year. And eventually, there will be a request for proposals with the close of the proposals and the award of the contract in 2024. The design and construction is estimated to take approximately 30 months from 2024 to 2027. And the operational phase, of course, is for 30 years, and that will start in 2027. Next slide. As mentioned earlier, significant due diligence activities have taken place over the past few months. The site investigation work is required to inform the design of the facility on the property. Much of the field work associated with the due diligence activities has been completed. There remains some archaeological work ongoing, and there will also be a Class EA and duty to consult with the local First Nations communities to take place as part of our due diligence process. The full range of due diligence activities are expected to be completed by the end of March 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelo, and I'd like to thank all of our speakers for providing updates. We are now going to move to the question period, so I would just like to, as you prepare your question, just reiterate the expected conduct during this part of the engagement session. So everyone's expected to conduct themselves in a respectful manner. Again, I spoke to you about disruptive and inappropriate. I want you to help me so that we don't have to mute individuals or move on to other people. I'm counting on your support because we are over 200 individuals participating in this engagement session. And so it's important to remember that it's one question per person. If you ask multiple questions, the group will answer the first question, and then we'll get you back in the queue for the others. One other thing that is important to remember is if we do get a lot of questions, don't worry about it. We will try and capture as many as we can. If we don't get to all of them, we will provide them to SolGen to be able to provide us with an FAQ format. But before we start fielding questions, I just want to invite any political officials who wish to address the participants before we move to the Q&A.
It's Steve Clark. Do you want me to start quickly?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to thank the Solicitor General's office for tonight's engagement. I think I was encouraged by some of the comments that were made tonight. I think the issue that I have, and perhaps I'll speak short so I can hear some questions from the community, it's the level of specificity that I think people are looking for. For example, there was a My Kemptville Now story today that talked about Mayor Peckford's letter that was sent out last week to the Solicitor General outlining some long-standing questions that the community has asked. I supported her letter with my own letter to Minister Jones, asking that the ministry give that level of specificity to the community about what is happening. Specifically, I just want to touch on 3 things. Appreciate you mentioning sewage, water treatment, and roads. I think there needs to be a more formal agreement with the municipality. I think the policing costs, the review of the funding model, I think there needs to be some very direct answers to the community about the funding model moving forward. The health drawings I thought were very helpful tonight, but again, I think we need a higher level of detail on what the impact is going to be to the Kemptville District Hospital and wait times in the area. And finally, in terms of the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services conveyance, I know as a local MPP, I think that's a very important piece to be able to provide that certainty to the municipality. They have a very exciting agricultural project that they'd like to advance to the government. And I think the faster we can get the answer, not just on the NGCS piece, but the faster we can get more specifics, better specifics on some of those issues that residents have asked for the last 15 months, the better off we are. So I want to reiterate that we need a higher degree of specifics moving forward. But thank you for allowing me to speak, and I'll keep taking notes from some of the questions. So thank you.
Thank you. I invite Her Worship Nancy Beckford, the Mayor, to say a few words.
Yeah, thank you, Ali, and all of the individuals from the ministry have spoken tonight. Obviously, we were very keen to have this discussion after our own forum and dialogue, both in the spring and then again in June of this year. So I think I've counted 8 sessions with key stakeholders and with the broader community. And I want to thank and express our appreciation to the ministry for accelerating information sharing and engagement. Obviously, tonight we have residents here who are curious, some may be supportive, and I expect many are in opposition, and that's not a surprise to anyone if you're paying attention to what's happening in North Grenville. So some of the efforts this evening to answer some questions I think are appreciated. As Minister Clark said, I did send another letter to the Solicitor General last week in advance of this meeting so that I could be confident when I communicate to my residents and business leaders that some of the things that we've been addressing for over a year now, to Minister Clark's points, will be executed, right? So, because the proof is in the pudding, and we all know that. So, on the surplus lands front, you've spoken to the lands South College, as well as at L Shape, and like Minister Clark, I think we're really keen to see if and when that can happen. So maybe a little more on timelines, certainly if maybe Mr. Vishkini can speak to that. Another question that has come up, and I just want to clarify for myself, but also for the community, is around paying a monthly water bill. Like any institution, I believe that you do pay a water bill. We're not financing water and sewer for prisoners at the facility, but maybe Mr. Vishkini, you can speak to that. Something else that's emerged, of course, is that this facility could potentially replace or displace other facilities in the area, namely OCDC or perhaps others. I know, as it was explained to me early on, that the investment in a correctional facility in Kemptville was done to expand capacity, to allow for more room in the system. But I really would appreciate if you could confirm that OCDC will remain open, if you can speak to your plans in that regard. I think certainly that would be helpful for council. And then finally, I know there's lots of residents with questions. We've heard a lot about family visits and about, well, what do family do? We don't have a hotel, and that is absolutely the case. This community's been waiting for a hotel for over a decade. So what do we do? What do those families do? Where do they go? And I certainly accept and recognize that virtual visits are increasingly common. But I wonder if you have any insight into how other facilities in smaller communities have obviously responded to the needs of families. We understand that these are relatively short stays, and perhaps that's the final thing you can speak to is we've heard 38 days is the average stay. Seems rather short. I don't know if that's a fluid number, but certainly the concerns around what families will do are real and they make sense, and I think it's important to respond to that. But I'll leave it there because I know the committee has a lot of questions, but we do appreciate your time this evening as we, make our way through some of what you've addressed. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you. So, Ali, I'll ask you to address maybe some of those comments, and after we'll move to Lucas, Chris, and Victor for the first three questions.
Okay. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Minister Clark, and our Minister Jones, to make sure that we're continuing with the engagements and being transparent. So thank you for the questions. First question, just in terms of the sewage and the water, definitely we can look to see how we can formalize. We can talk to our minister's office as well to see how we can formalize in terms of our commitment to paying for that. We said it verbally. We're very comfortable in terms of saying it because we do not want to download any costs in terms of the sewage or the water. And the monthly bill, absolutely, we pay for that. The city does not. The municipality does not pay for that, but we do. So in terms of that sewage and water, we'll see if we can, through our partners Infrastructure Ontario, really galvanize that a little more and formalize that a little more in terms of an MOU or an agreement or some understanding that makes the municipality feel more comfortable. In terms of policing costs, that's something that was brought up, and people bring up the example of Quinty, and that's why we use that. This facility is very different. This facility is smaller facilities than most facilities. It's obvious and as well, as you can see from some of the renderings today and before, very therapeutic. We're trying to get people in. We're trying to rehabilitate. We're trying to move them out. Majority of people will be sentenced, so that means they've committed a crime. That's 2 years less a day. So we are not trying to house, gang members, or we're not trying to house people that are violent there. We're trying to house people that can be rehabilitated. And you're right, Mayor Peckford, the average stay will be around 40 days. Because again, these people haven't committed anything that is nefarious, meaning 2 years more. And so they come, they stay, and then they go back to their communities. In terms of healthcare and how we move forward with that, we do want to, after this session, we want to give everyone a chance just to see that healthcare strategy that we have. But we will be engaging in the hospital starting in probably Q1 of 2022, just to show them what we have, show them how self-sustainable we want to be, and we're happy. If we feel that the hospital, in terms of being able to be able to house any other needs that we need, we're happy to move those needs to Ottawa and move there. But we're also happy to help bolster any needs that the hospital have for imaging equipment or scanning equipment that can help the municipality, but that can also help us as well. So we don't want to be a drain. We want to be self-sustainable, but we're also fluid and open to those discussions with the hospital. In terms of the agricultural land, especially the southern lands, we do want to help in terms of getting that land transferred to us. We do want you to be able to use it for any kind of agricultural, for any kind of use that you want, as well as the L portion as well. So we're happy to help promote that. We're happy to help in any way to make that happen, because we understand how important that is for the community and how important to make sure that this site still remains a beacon from the past as well, a very positive beacon in terms of agriculture and greening space. In terms of the land and when the transfer will be, we don't actually own the land in our portfolio or have that, not own the land, but have that the land transferred into our portfolio yet. It's scheduled to be in 2022, so next year. So as we're working on that transfer, then we can crystallize in terms of the L portion and the use of that L portion and allowing you to use it for any agricultural use, as well as the transfer of the southern lands and expediting those so that it coincides with the transfer of land into our portfolio, into the SolGen portfolio. So that's why we haven't been able to really crystallize any kind of agreement, because we actually haven't had the land transferred to us. It's still government and land writ large, but the ownership still hasn't moved, and so that's what we're doing in 2022. In terms of OCDC will still remain, absolutely. It's a staple for us. We want to still remain close. We want to be close to Ottawa. We want to be close to the courts in Ottawa, especially for the remand population. So the population that has committed offenses, 1, potentially 2 years more, or offenses that we're holding for the federal government until their trial. We want those to be close to the courts. We want those people to still be in OCDC. And what we'll likely do with OCDC is obviously keep it, as I said, but we want to retrofit the inside as well, so we can modernize the inside. So once we're able to vacate some clients and bring them to our Eastern Ontario site in Kemptville, then we want to also be able to retro and modernize that facility as well. So it unlocks the potential in that facility in the future. In terms of family visits, definitely they're moving more virtual. Families feel much more comfortable doing virtual. But in terms of families that come, given that the stay is very short, we won't have that many families that are coming. And also, it's still from the catchment of the greater Ottawa area for the people that we have. So in terms of overnight trips, that will likely not be an issue. However, between virtual and between providing very normalized space to have family visits, and what I mean by normalized space is they're not just sitting in a booth and talking to them across from a glass. We want to create spaces where family can come and actually interact with their loved ones. So family rooms or family visitation rooms where the whole family can come stay for a long period of time during the day to have that interaction with them and then going home. So it makes that interaction good. It actually helps the person to rehabilitate themselves, but it gives them a lot more time to be with that family member in a space. So that, if they are making a trip, let's say from another municipality over, that trip is very fruitful because they get that time to be intimately with their loved one. So I think I answered all the questions. If not, we're happy to come back, Your Worship, or Minister Clark.
I just very quickly, and I know you've got lots of hands. So those court visits, and again, this was an issue that was raised about transfers to court, policing costs when it comes to get. Can you confirm, Mr. Vishkini, that you expect that to remain the case, that isn't a COVID accommodation, that's a norm in your institutions moving forward?
Absolutely, it's going to be a norm. We are retrofitting all of our institutions. The nice part about this institution is going to be that we're going to retrofit it when we build it, not retrofit it, but build it to spec. But we are trying to put video units in all of our institutions because we want to drive video, especially for pretrial. We definitely want to drive those uses. So for bail hearings and things like that, we want to really drive that usage to be at 80, 90%, maybe even 100% in the future, so that there aren't those movements. But given that the majority of people that we want to house here are sentenced, they've already interacted with the court system. Mm-hmm. So they are trying to serve their time and then be returned into their community. So we'll have full video capabilities in this suite. It's not just COVID. We want to continue to do it in perpetuity. But the other mitigating factor is that we have sentenced people staying with us. So the movement in and out of courts will be really mitigated because they don't need to go to court because they've already been sentenced. Does that satisfy, Your Worship?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. So we'll start with our first question with Lucas.
Hi there, good evening. Thanks for your time to the representatives of the Office of the Solicitor General and to MPP Steve Clark, and of course our Mayor Beckford. We do appreciate your time here tonight, but I feel like we're not being taken seriously as representatives or as citizens of North Grenville. We're just being told that this is happening, and basically you're placating by having these meetings. We're really not getting meaningful discussion out of any of this. But I'd like to just point out that diagram that was shown by Ali there earlier. In that diagram of the site, I could see the building I was born in where my grandmother and my father both passed away. That's the Kemptville Hospital, as well as the house I lived in for 20 plus years growing up, the schools that I attended, elementary and high school, and the college where my mom taught for 30 years, as well as the fields where I learned to grow food. How can you in all seriousness tell us that this is a good idea, a good choice of site in a time of food scarcity that's increasing, to be using this invaluable agricultural land to put this kind of a facility on? And I pose that to you, MPP Clark, as well as to anyone representing the Office of the Solicitor General. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lucas, and I appreciate those comments, and I understand the connectivity. We were able to, drive around in the municipality, see what a strong municipality it is, and obviously family-oriented. For us, obviously, with the site selection, and I did discuss this. Actually, let me take a step back. So I know it seems like, as you said, Lucas, that we're moving through the process. One piece is we never do engagements usually this early in in. So in terms of working with us in terms of the evolution of getting certain agreements in place, whether it be the land agreement or the sewage agreement, usually we have these kinds of engagements a lot later on in the project. But obviously, because of the good advocation from Minister Clark in your worship in the municipality, that's why we're here today. So it's, we're going along the journey. To the site selection, I spoke about the reasons why we were able to choose that site, because there was no barriers for those other reasons. But I understand the impact, especially on the agricultural piece. So that is why, twofold, with the L portion, which is almost going to be 1 to 2 football fields, we want to promote that to be agricultural. So we want to be able to use that, and to be able to use that to get back to those agricultural roots. And so whether it's the L portion, or secondly, whether if it's the southern portion, which is that red portion, which we are going to work to get it transferred over to the municipality, those are the two spaces where we can truly help to bring back that agricultural importance to that municipality. So we're working with you, not against you, in terms of making sure that happens in terms of agriculture, so you can keep that historical piece. And obviously for the future as well, the future generations, they don't lose that connectivity that site is agricultural. We want it to be, yes, a site where we're doing a social need, which is an institution. We want to make sure that site obviously is that social need, because it does fit all of our site selection. But we also want it to be a site where agricultural can flourish, and the city and the municipality can flourish in terms of being able to use it to link back to that. But thank you, Lucas.
Thank you, Elliot. We'll now go to Chris Wilson, and it'll be followed by Victor Lachance.
Thanks so much, everybody. I appreciate your time. There's a large majority of people in North Grenville that are opposed to this prison project. And the others are only in favor of it because of the economic benefit that it's supposed to bring to the community. So I had a question to Steve Clark and maybe the representatives of the Solicitor General, but I'd like Steve to answer, please. Most of the studies that I've seen, many from the US, but one in particular from Ontario, show that less than 20% of the small towns see any economic benefit, if anything. So what makes Steve Clark think that Kemptville would be different? And what makes us as residents believe Steve?
Sure, if I may start first. So twofold. One is that when Infrastructure Ontario spoke, so Angelo, Senior Vice President from Infrastructure Ontario spoke, he spoke about a current example that we have in terms of building in Kenora and Thunder Bay, and how many, approximately 80% of the subcontractors being local, as well as in Kenora, I think it was around 18%. So in terms of when we're building, there is an economic positive. During the operations, we will have about anywhere from 300 to 400 staff as well that come in to that facility. So in terms of, and we know that obviously as people come to work, they also shop, they go to lunch, so there is that positive spillover. So I know that those studies say that, but we know that when people come to work, they go and get coffee. We know that when people come to work, some of them do go get lunch and some of them do shop. So we know that 100% that we have the stats from Kenora and Thunder Bay, and we know that obviously that when you look at the staff that are coming, they will spend money while it's there. But the economic benefit is just, we're coming here for social good in terms of being able to create a facility that is modern, that helps people rehabilitate and get them back on their feet. The economic factor is secondary to that. So the economic factor is not the driver of bringing this, it is the social piece.
Thank you. I'll ask Victor Lachance. That'll be followed by Patricia.
Yes, thank you for everyone and the opportunity to speak. I want to go back to the first question the person asked. I'm not sure it was answered, so I will ask the question maybe this way. You've spoken about wanting to enhance and protect the agricultural nature of the community. So how does paving over arable land and tearing down existing agricultural buildings enhance our food security and our agricultural heritage and history?
Absolutely, Victor. So I think, I spoke about this. So we're trying to do a double use. So obviously all of the lands are not going to be agricultural because we're using, as you saw in the gray area, that will be the footprint where we are. But surrounding on the L, which is again 1 to 2 football fields in width and goes all the way from the western corridor along the southern corridor, can be used for agricultural or greening. And the southern lands that we want to transfer as well to the municipality, which is the acreage is very large. I don't know it off the top of my head, but it's a large plot of land that we want to be able to transfer so that it can be used as agricultural as well, or greening, or whatever the municipality would like to use it as a positive space. So although the entire piece of land is not going to be able to be used as agricultural, we're trying to accommodate that L portion, which again is a very large portion, as well as that southern portion can be used as agricultural. So we're not going to be holding those lands and not allowing the use of it, where we want the municipality to be able to use that land for greening and for agriculture. So that's the best answer, because we're not saying no to the agricultural use. We're just saying that it has to be a mixed use, that we're going to take our space that we need, but the rest of it we want to use for agricultural and or greening.
Thank you. We'll go to Patricia, and after that, I'll field a couple of questions that came through the chat, and then we'll get back to the live questions with Colleen and Julie. Patricia.
Okay, thank you very much for this evening. My question concerns the police service in Kemptville, the small town of Kemptville. I believe that it would be enhanced, but I did notice somewhere you said they would drive the prisoners to Ottawa. Who's going to pay the extra costs of that? And will it be paid on an ongoing basis? And I believe that you will not be contributing enough taxes to pay for an increase in police services. We are a base of 7,000 taxpayers. We are not Ottawa. We are not 500,000 people. We cannot, if it was in Ottawa, then they would be paying a penny a year extra. We're going to be paying about $60 a year, every year extra on our taxes to cover the police costs. Am I correct in that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. Very, very important topic. So I'll try to address it for you. Transfer, inmate transfer, as you said, by the police. And sorry if I didn't speak clearly, was that we want to keep that in Ottawa proper. So where OCDC is right now. The people that will be coming to us are sentenced, so they do not need to go to court because they've already been sentenced. And we also want to utilize as much as possible pre-trial the video court. So in terms of the transportation piece, we see that it'll be very minimal impact, because that's why we're keeping Ottawa to stay OCDC, which we call, to stay close to the court. So those transfers can happen there. In terms of policing costs, we have been working with a few municipalities. When you look at Quinte, and that's why we use that example of Quinte, we see that the institution results in about 50 to 100 calls a year, right? In terms of that. And we're working in terms of triaging those calls and bringing those calls down. The difference between Quinte and what we're building here is that we're building a very modern facility. We're building a facility that will majority-wise house sentenced, right? Not a mixture of inmates. A very therapeutic environment. No one is sharing a bedroom. No one is sharing a cell, we call it, but we can call it bedroom. No one is sharing a cell, two people. They all have their own independent space. They have a day room. They have outdoor space that's therapeutic. And so we won't see the number of calls. So if Quinte is 50 to 100 calls, we believe that this will be well below 50 calls a year. And we're happy to work with the municipality if that does come to a fruition where we're looking and seeing that there's an increase, we're happy to work with the municipality and have that dialogue to see why did it increase and how we can mitigate that increase. But using Quinty as a template of only 50 to 100 calls a year, and the type of facility that is, and the type of profile of people that are in that facility versus what we are trying to do here, we're very confident that it'll be below that the lowest mark, which is 50 calls a year.
Thank you. So I would like to just go to a couple of the questions that came in the chat. So the first questions are from Sarah Siliberto and from Lisa Gallant. So will you provide a copy of this presentation and a transcript of this session?
Yes, definitely a copy of the presentation.
Okay. And then the next question that came into the chat is, what Indigenous groups did you consult, and were the hereditary Indigenous leaders of the unceded territory in question consulted, and what response did you get?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Daniel, I don't know if I-7, because we're obviously using I-7 as a great partner in terms of those engagements. So I don't know if someone from I-7 can help.
Well, maybe I'll, okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Hi, Daniel from IO here. Yeah, we definitely have already one meeting with the AOFPN very recently. Actually, was the second meeting, and we are in touch with other groups such as the AO, and so it's ongoing. There will be ongoing engagement on a going forward basis with all the groups.
I think two areas that we generally hear from our Indigenous partners is one, making sure that we're building a facility that's culturally appropriate, that has the look and feel that's very important to our Indigenous partners, and has the programming as well. So that's usually one piece that we hear from. The second piece is how they can also be involved in the build as well. And so that's a positive impact for their community as well. So usually those are the two issues that we hear from when we engage with our close Indigenous partners.
Thank you, and we'll do one last question, and after that I'll move to Colleen Linus to start again the 5 questions. So you say the average, this question is from Paulina Grace. You say the average stay would be 40 days with sentenced inmates serving a maximum of 2 years less a day. But what about the inmates that are on remand? They could be any type of offender, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. They can be any type of offender. But the reason why we're building this facility is to, in the vast majority, just house sentenced because of the style and because the ownership of sentenced clients or inmates is with us, the province, and so that's why I quoted the 40 days. I don't know, Daryl, if you have any supplemental.
Yeah, thanks, Ali. I mean, yes, for example, situations like that, like long-term remands will be mostly housed in Ottawa. In those situations, primarily the sentenced clientele will be in the Kemptville site, dealing with those programmatic situations and trying to get issues with them, dealing with a much more secure environment. In those situations where those individuals serving 30, 40 days can do certain specific programs before returning back to their communities.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go back to live questions. I'll invite Colleen Linus, followed by Julie Lankin.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and it's Linus, by the way.
Oh, sorry about that.
No problem. Okay, well, thank you. So I'm going to go back to Ali. A year ago, around this time when you had the engagement session, you spoke very definitively that there would be no tax implications for the people of North Grenville. And I have 2 words for you: police services. And sadly, what I'm hearing you do tonight is what I unfortunately expected, which is you're diminishing the reality that there will be tax increases for this community for the policing services that are required by this facility. You cannot tell us now, predict in any way, in 7 years, in 10 years, in 15 years from now, what the policing needs will be at that facility. So I wish you would just be candid and just acknowledge we've seen the numbers from Penetang, we've seen the numbers from Greater Napanee. We can go around the province and find all the numbers. We just know, in fact, there will be a tax implication, and it's important that that finally be acknowledged by this ministry, by our MPP, by our mayor, and stop pretending it's not happening. And the other reality that we had to find out only through an access to information request, which, by the way, withheld 90% of the relevant information regarding the site selection, we found out that part of the reason for choosing this site was it allowed you enough land to expand in the future. Now, you'll tell me we don't know if we're going to, we may not. The fact of the matter is that this community has no guarantee that that will not expand over time. And so whatever plans you have for this buffer zone, which does not sound terribly appealing, by the way, and I think Lucas was making the point, why lose any of that precious land? Why pave over any of that precious land? So my question is for Minister Clark. And Minister Clark, you have not answered. 2 people have asked you to answer, and you have not answered them. We asked you to come here in person and talk to people. You have not done that either. So my question to you is, I want you to look Lucas in the eye, and I want you to answer his question about how you could possibly have thought that taking that piece of land, paving it over, destroying that heritage farmland, and building a prison was in the best interests of this community. Thank you.
Yeah, Ali, I wasn't expecting to have so many questions tonight, but I want Colleen to know, I know she's very angry at me. And I want to assure everyone tonight, the reason I pushed so hard to have this meeting tonight was I felt there needed to be some answers. I think you heard me at the start of this call. I think there are some legitimate concerns that people need to have answered in the community. And if what you want, Colleen, and if what the group wants is to have a meeting with me in Kemptville, then let's just do it. Let's just have the meeting, and you can let SolGen continue with this session tonight, and then I will work with you because I'm at Queen's Park. I communicated both to you and to the other organization that the House is sitting, and I'm here. So rather than belabor the meeting, I will commit to you that we'll have a meeting in the municipality. You can answer the questions. I'll bring some people with me to answer who are the experts. But rather than ask me all the questions when it's SolGen's meeting, as your MPP, we will organize something. And I thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. So I will now go to Julie Langdon.
Hello. Sorry for the background noise. I'm at home. So my name is Julie Langdon, and I'm the Executive Director of the John Howard Society of Kingston and District. Leeds in Grenville is in our catchment area, and as an agency, we're always advocates for alternatives to incarceration first. And we believe responses for crime should come from the community support. I'm sorry, do you want to skip me? And then we'll come back when my son's a little bit more.
Absolutely, not a problem.
So can we go to, this person on the list is Lisette Major.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I want to go back to Sarah Siliberto's question, and Ali said there would be a copy of the presentation available. I want to be clear on what he actually means on that. Is it just the nice, pretty slides that you did this evening, or will it also include the questions and answers that we're listening to right now?
Thanks for that. It definitely includes the slide. I'll look in terms of the Qs and HPs as well. And we'll get back to them. But I do want to actually talk about something that I believe Colleen brought up in terms of the policing costs. The reason why we showed the Quinte example is actually to be transparent. The Quinte example shows 50 to 100 calls a year out of 365 days. And we know that this facility is very different than Quinte, as I said. We know this is sentence. We know this is a very therapeutic environment where people have their own space. So what we're projecting is that it'll be less than 50 calls. So if you have 10, 20 calls that are coming to this facility out of 365 days, we don't feel that it'll be a major impact on the policing. But if we get to that point, and it is, as we are doing with our partners in Penetang and in Quinte, and in Penetang, it's a 1,200 offender. We'll work with the municipality, but wanted to make sure that we definitely, that's why we use that, and we're transparent about using the Quinte, because we feel that this is a very different facility, and that we will be vastly under the bottom, which is 50 calls out of 365 days. In terms of the expansion is always an indicator no matter what we build, whether if it's so any kind of social infrastructure, actually, it's a consideration, whether if it's a hospital, whether it's a police detachment, a courthouse, or corrections. In terms of expansion, there is no actual need for us to expand. And if for some reason in 50 years, 60, 100 years from now that need is there, we have the space obviously in our fenced-in area, and that's why we're very comfortable with that buffer space in terms of being able for the municipality to use it for 20, 30, 50, 100 years, as well as transferring that southern portion as well to the municipality for their use.
So we'll go to Denise, followed by Nadia Gray, and then it's me. Denise, are you able to unmute?
Sorry, for some reason I'm not able to unmute Denise, so maybe let's go to the next one and hopefully we can go back to Denise in a moment.
Okay, so we'll go to Nadia Gray.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Nadia.
Thank you for your time, all of you that have spoken. You're excellent bureaucrats. You've done a thorough job as bureaucrats. But this was supposed to be, in my understanding, a discussion of the community. The stakeholders are not John Howard and all the others that you mentioned, really. The stakeholders are the people that buy houses here, that have moved here, that have lived here for a very long time, since '82. And the question I have to Stephen Clark is, all of the people that spoke except you do not have the ability to change this project. They are doing their best to cause it to occur. Our mayor has worked diligently because she considers herself a junior level partner. But this is not about that. This is about our community, about what is to be done in the southern section of it. You're all assuring us of how comfortable all the people will be that will live in the facility. But you have not, it seems, consulted, because the word used by Steve Clark was unalterable when he announced this particular project. And today, it seems that it is unalterable because some very talented, some very smart, some very articulate people have been working diligently within their job descriptions to do what they were asked to do. But this community has not been asked. This community was told. And surely we can back up from here and take a look at what we want. It may come out that the majority want this. I don't know. But I resent tremendously the undemocratic word unalterable. And the work that you've all done will ensure something happens here. But is it for the good of the land? Is it for the good of the people? That has not been even discussed. So, Mr. Clark, since you now seem to be not wanting unalterable as the solution, and you're going to come and talk to us, how about a real consultation? How about putting a stop to this while it is discussed? Because you are changing this to be the way you've all decided, because it's available and Ontario owns it. But so do we. We are Ontario. We live here. So my question is, can you explain $250 million going to this? You talked about all sorts of other things that will cost money, taxpayer money. I think $250 million to sit on the land here in prisons of 235 people is an enormous waste of money. Perhaps I'm not alone, but I haven't been asked. Thank you for giving me the time tonight. So my question, Mr. Clark, is why did you enter this as unalterable and didn't even bother asking your constituents? And you went to Elections Canada to quiet this community. Those things I find unacceptable and demeaning to this community. And now all these talented people are telling us what we can do for the people that will be incarcerated. But what did you do for us? I'm sorry. I'm very angry. I'm sorry that I've spoken so sharply, but in effect, I'm not. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Don't apologize. We understand, obviously, right? This is emotional for the citizens of the municipality that have been here for a while. So I appreciate your comments. One thing I will say is, as we're moving forward this, we are trying to find the balance of being able to allow the municipality and work with the municipality as a partner to gain a benefit of that lands, because the lands didn't have a dedicated future use and investment. And so we're trying to make sure that we actually help stimulate that investment in terms of the agricultural on the L portion and on the southern portion. And just secondly, as I believe Minister Clark already recognized that certain discussions should be taken, and he's committed that he'll have that discussion with a group of the citizens moving forward.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Ali. And I'm committed to have those conversations. And again, as I said at the start of the process, I want to make sure that those community concerns are addressed. But at the same time, as someone who has proposed projects in Brockville and in North Grenville, I want to make sure that we have that opportunity. I think you touched on it, Ali, about having some agricultural opportunities on that site, but also this project moving forward. So I remain committed to this project, but I also remain committed to working with the community on some of the challenges and some of the legitimate concerns that they brought forward.
Thank you. I will now go to Len Hadinsky, followed by Andrea.
Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
One of the concerns that I have, and I'm sure I'm not alone, and this pertains to the site selection process. And I have some comments and a question for Angelo Gismondi. At our session a year ago, it was identified there were 100 or perhaps 130 sites that were assessed. In the 10 pages that were released as part of the request for information, there were 38 sites identified in July of 2019. So it seems that there were quite a number of sites that were identified and assessed. And my question is, and in fact, Angelo, you may recall at our session about a year ago, you had a takeaway from a question asked by Kirk Albert regarding the 100 sites. You were going to get back to us to confirm the list of 100 sites. All we've seen to date is 5 or perhaps 6 sites that were assessed. So my specific question is, when will the list of 100 plus sites and their assessment be provided to us? Angelo, could you comment on that?
If I may, while Angelo is coming, in terms of potentially that 100 plus, just as anybody would be potentially looking for a commercial property or a house, you assess obviously a lot of properties and then you shortlist. So I think the 38 in terms of the FOI that you got were the shortlisted ones, but many more were reviewed, and that's how we get to the 100. Just like if you were buying a house, you don't shortlist, the 50, 60 houses that potentially any of us would look at. You might look at 50, 60 houses, but you might shortlist only 5 or 10 to go see. So that's what I believe. But Angelo, I know you're having technical difficulties, so if you're
Angelo had to drop Ali, and so he asked me to fill in any question that come up with him. Yes, in fact, I think there was an FOI request with the site selection process, right? And as noted earlier, some of the information I think was redacted in accordance with cabinet records and advice to government and third-party information and economic other interests of Ontario. So that's probably what the full list has not been released.
Okay, thank you. I'll invite Andrea, followed by David. Okay, I think we're having difficulty unmuting Andrea, so we'll go to David and I'll come back to you right after Andrea. Having issues. Okay, I'll try one more. Mary V.
Hold on a second, I got it now.
Okay, there we go, David. Thank you.
Yeah, it wouldn't unmute for me, but now all of a sudden it did. But thanks very much.
Okay.
So first, thank you for holding this information session. I really appreciate it. There hasn't been a lot of opportunity for this, so and you went through a lot of trouble. I believe in democracy, and I think for democracy to function, there has to be engagement. So thank you for the opportunity for me to engage today and for joining that process. At the start of today's community engagement session, there was a statement made that consultation had taken place with schools, hospitals, daycares, and municipality, and that no major concerns were raised. I must say I find this peculiar, because in North Grenville, opposition against this project is visible. There's lawn signs up, there's been a lot of stories in the press. Formal presentations were made to council on March 23rd, 2021, June 22nd, 2021, and community members recently protested in front of Steve Clark's office. In the June 22nd, 21 council meeting, there was a statement made by Kristen Strackerjan, who's one of the councillors. And it was a statement she made when she was in conversation with Kirk, who is a member of JOG. And what she stated, and it's reflected on the video coverage of that meeting, says, "We all agree that nobody wants a prison in their backyard. A want for a prison is probably, not realistic, and I don't think we would want it for economic benefits or any other reason." So My question is, how can you state that there are no major concerns when residents are clearly opposed to a prison being built in North Grenville? And will you acknowledge that there is opposition, or continue to state there are no major issues?
Yeah, thank you for that. And in terms of the stakeholders, when we met with them, it's that there were no major concerns in terms of things that we couldn't work with them to help mitigate, right? Whether if it's the school boards in terms of safety and security, and making sure that we keep them apprised of how we're creating the buffer zone, how we are creating a strict area, what the sight lines will be, whether if it was hospital, in terms of being transparent and working with them to see what services we might need from them and how we can help bolster those services actually for the whole community, because correction, the facility could be an anchor to help promote some of those things that can come to bolster the hospital. So that's what I mean in terms of no major concerns, that there was nothing that was insurmountable for us to be able to work with those partners to make sure that we mitigate any concerns that they have or help bolster any positive things that they want to see from this project.
Ellie, it's Mayor Nancy Peckford. I did sit in on every stakeholder session. So I do think it is important to highlight that all of the school boards, both English and French, expressed appreciation for the information. I have 3 kids on the campus who go to school in close proximity to this potential future facility. All school boards did not articulate or signal any opposition. In fact, a couple have expressed interest in potentially doing some adult learning and programming. I was on the healthcare sector call. I was on all of the stakeholder calls, and I have to reinforce what Mr. Vishkini has said is absolutely concerns were raised, but no opposition was expressed.
Okay, thank you. So I'll go to Marie V, and then we'll try Andrea again. Go ahead, Marie.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. We're talking about the inmates that would be in this potential jail complex. Some of them will be there for 2 years less a day, and they will be in a facility where there's no access to with public transport. So if their families or friends don't have a car, then they're out of luck. It doesn't matter how beautiful the facility is, they won't have the important support or occasion of visits with their loved ones. How can that be called humane treatment? The other part of this is when OCDC is undergoing the renovations, I would imagine that you will be hosting more of those inmates in Kemptville, and the same thing will happen again. They'll be away from their communities in a place where there's no public transit to get to, and a definite lack of social services and other accommodations needed. How can you call that humane treatment of inmates?
Thank you for that. So just in terms of the OCDC, the Ottawa facility, the area that we would like to do the renovations is the area where people will actually vacate. So there'll be no impact. We don't have to displace who will be staying there, because it will renovate the area that's already vacated to upgrade that facility, whether if it's for female or mental health purposes or other purposes. So there will be no displacement moving people to Kemptville. In terms of the social services, the reason why we're trying to make this facility self-sustainable in terms of, you saw in the healthcare and bringing the healthcare, but beyond healthcare, it's bringing the mental health services right there, having mental health nurses embedded in that facility, having office space for our partners like EFRI and other partners, so that they're embedded right into that facility so that they can help with those services. So for us, we're trying to bring everything so we're self-sustainable in terms of those 4 walls. I think, Daryl, if you want to supplement on that in terms of just the public transit piece and getting people back home.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Ali. Look forward. So with respect to the offenders being there for 2 years less a day, I mean, that's the max in provincial custody. And what we've said before during the presentation and previously is our intent would never to house them there for 2 years less a day. This is primarily for sent individuals only, so we wouldn't put those individuals in this institution. With regards to public transit, we have several facilities now that don't have public transit to them. However, we talked about earlier about visits going back and forth. Many times with the video visitations, they can go that back and forth. We've utilized in facilities such as Monteith, Thunder Bay, Toronto areas. So I think we can mitigate that going forward in a humane manner. Make sure those offenders get the treatment they want, see their families without causing that long distance movement, as well as ensuring that the protocols in place and programming are kept with those individuals and keeping those long-term stays out of the Kemptville institution.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Al.
No, thank you. And that's where we also want to utilize video. So if family member, loved ones are having problems getting there because of transit reasons or because they don't have a car, that's where we're using that video and making sure that we increase our technology use and being fully fit up for video visitations.
Okay, so we'll go to a couple of questions in the chat and then I'll come back to some live questions. So from Professor Justin Pichet, Elizabeth Fry Society of Ottawa has come out in opposition to the project. What will you do with imprisoned women if E. Fry refuses to collaborate with you?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think the first thing is, and our CIO Maria Schneider talked about this, is, you know, when we look at the facility, it's just one part of transformation. The facility is about once we do have to have the offenders in our custody and to be able to provide them with a much more humane environment, a much more therapeutic environment. But it's really about the front end of the justice sector transformation, where we're trying to actually not incarcerate people, especially people that shouldn't be incarcerated. So we speak and the government has announced utilization of GPS monitoring, meaning that instead of people having to be put in our institutions and having to wait for a bail hearing or for a short-term stay, that they can actually be in the community but on GPS monitoring, as well as looking at other ways to do our court systems where we're looking and finding a better balance in terms of being able to keep people out of incarceration. So doing everything that they can, working with the courts to keep people out and having a different court system to be able to allow that. So I think for us, it's once they're in, we want that therapeutic, but we're actually trying to keep them out. In terms of the female aspect of it, we want to make sure, obviously, in Kemptville, that we have good female spaces that are as well therapeutic. But we also want to make sure, as we're retroing the Ottawa campus that we have, OCDC, that we're helping increase the females that will be in that facility as well. So it's going to be a huge benefit for them. In terms of other service providers that we work with, we have very strong relationships with them. So in terms of them walking away, we have very strong relationships with them. We haven't seen that with our other facilities.
Thank you. So Pauline is asking if we have an idea of the percentage of inmates that will be sentenced versus on remand.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'll ask Daryl to answer, but I know for us, we want the vast majority. The reason why we are building it this way is the vast majority. So vast majority to me is 70, 80, 90% of people staying, being sentenced. That's kind of my definition of vast. Daryl, would you concur?
Yeah, thank you. That's correct. I mean, we at least probably around 10%. The only people in remand going to institution, those have been chosen and through the SAFER tool of classifying the appropriate go to that institution for rehabilitative purposes. They wouldn't be sent there for a long-term remand. It's for the purpose of a classification of their institution, that a treatment program or that environment would better the individual and their reintegration back into custody. So the population remand would be very low, probably around 10%.
Okay, thank you. We'll do one more question, and then after that, I'll go back to live questions, and we'll go to Michael Olotu, and then Albert K. and Victor Lachance. So some studies show that the question comes from fiscal. Some studies show that less than 20% of small towns saw an economic benefit from construction of a correctional facility, and the other saw economic losses. Is Steve Clark in the Solicitor General's office aware of these studies, and what makes him think Kemptville would be any different?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think we already answered that question. One, I think the majority of those studies are American, And what the American, correctional system is really trying to do is house those inmates for as cost effective as possible. And we're not trying to do that. That's why we're making such a big investment. We've shown you the construction economic benefit in Thunder Bay, in Kenora, as our partners in infrastructure Ontario did. And again, we are building this for the social good, and the economic impact is secondary as a benefit as well.
Okay. So we'll go back to live questions. So I'll start with Michael Olutu.
Sorry, Daniel.
Yeah.
I believe our partners from the John Howard Society want to speak again. Julia.
Okay.
Julia, I don't know if you're still there, but there you are.
I am.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, working from home has its drawbacks. So I'm executive director of John Howard Kingston, and as an agency, we're advocates for alternatives to incarceration first, and believe that responses to crime should come from an increase of community supports. I'm wondering what type of engagement and consultation John Howard will have with this institution, and learning more about how you plan to invest in agencies like ours, because currently the Solicitor General does not fund the John Howard Society of Kingston and District for any support staff for Quinte, Rockville Jail, or St. Lawrence Valley. This is something we do completely unfunded and off the side of our desks.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll ask Daryl to supplement. So I think in one of the slides we talked about creating that dedicated space for our service providers, and we're happy to look at agreements to make sure that those services that we are bringing, that we are funding for those services in this new jail. So definitely we can look at that. Daryl, anything else to add about that?
No, I think you answered a lot, Allie. With the one respect I'm going to talk is that, as I said earlier, when we get closer to the build phase completion, bringing our partner in like John Howard and Eve Fry to go through the building and talk about that, and certainly open those discussions of how we can make those arrangements work more better for both parties.
Yeah, and I think the one thing here is we are doing these engagements very, very early, obviously, and so usually we're doing these engagements probably a year from now, from where we are today. So these engagements that we've been doing, the first one, and then the stakeholders, a few of the stakeholders, and now it's very early in the process. But we're happy to sit down also, Julie, with our MAG partners to talk about how we are trying to work to actually do exactly what you said, is have alternatives to incarceration. So we're happy to have that conversation with you moving forward, and bring our MAG partners there to the table as well.
Thank you. So I'll go to Michael, followed by Albert K, and then Victor Lachance. Michael.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. Listen, for just a full disclaimer, I think I'm in full support of this project. A couple of questions I will have for everyone, though, and why I'm supportive, I'm very sympathetic to the concerns that a lot of people who are having some apprehension about the project itself. So a couple of things I wanted to raise for all of you on the issue of complement benefit to the community. Would you guys, as part of your planning, dedicate a certain degree or certain percentage of your staffing complement to come from North Grenville? It's been done in other jurisdictions where you can have a memorandum of agreement with the municipality in terms of staffing. So that way, people from the community will have that assurances that they're going to have that benefit. The second question I have is more of a comment that I think a number of people have raised the issue of visitation. I think you raised that there were about 38 days potential staying in the facility. You would not underestimate the impact of somebody moving away from their family, even for 2, 3, 4, 5 days. So while we may be presenting as, there will be some concern in terms of visit, And I think we should really pay attention to that and make sure we complement any planning we have around potential visitation. Because video visitation has been proven in a number of jurisdictions as very problematic, particularly when you don't have access to the internet in the prisons. So I think that is one area that I think is very important for you guys to pay attention to. And I equally want to complement what the last speaker spoke about, that the business of incarceration and reintegration of offender is not unique to just put them in jail. We have a number of organizations like John Howard Society, Elizabeth Fry Society, that perform, I call them the heavy lifters. They're the people that really make sure that your reintegration practices are successful. So as you're developing the plan to put this facility in North Grenville, I think it's reasonable to look at those type of organizations that are around North Grenville community to complement some level of resource support to them, because they are the people who are going to provide the sustainability of reintegration practices that you're going to be doing in those facilities. So those are my comments, which is one, let's make sure that we're looking at potential visitation structure where we're not going to be imposing a lot of stress and pressure on the municipality and their resources, and equally look at the complement of your staffing and dedicate a certain percentage of that complement in a memorandum of agreement with the municipality in terms of making sure they come from North Grenville. Those are my comments.
Yeah, thank you for that. So definitely take away that MOU piece. I understand that. In terms of the staffing complement, that we want to do here has to align with the type of facility that we have. So it's going to be a very healthy blend between, yes, having our officers there for the safety and security, but it's going to be very heavily weighted also on having program officers, recreational officers. We're going to have mental health nurses, trauma-informed people. So it's going to be actually a very healthy balance, because if we're building an environment that's supposed to be therapeutic and have the programming space to do it and the outdoor space, then we want to make sure that the right type of staff are there too. So it's not just about supervising them, it's about actually rehabilitating them. So definitely we can continue to talk to you and work on that. And I agree, we have to get our partners involved in terms of North Grenville and the surrounding areas, in terms of what services that they can bring to help rehabilitate as well. So we are absolutely open in terms of bringing those partners to help bolster what we're already trying to do in the facility.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Albert K. and then Victor Lachance.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you for taking my question this evening. First, I'd like to make 2 points of clarification. Mr. Vashkini, I would ask you to check your facts with Mr. Clark as to whether there was dedicated planning in place for the property where the prison is proposed. Earlier, you said there was none. You could discuss this with him. Secondly, you've referred to Kemptville a number of times this evening as a city. We're anything but a city. I think that's one of the key things that nobody seems to understand so far. We're not Greater Ottawa. We're 4,000 people in a rural community. We're not a city. So we invited SolGen to Kemptville to meet with us all face to face for this engagement session, because we wanted you to meet the people that that may potentially become neighbors to your facility. I was very disappointed to hear this evening that SolGen was in Kemptville very recently based on your earlier comment, but didn't feel it was important enough to accommodate our request. For my question, I want to circle back to the site selection process. Like Len, who spoke earlier, I'd like to know why you, Mr. Vashkini, and Mr. Gismondi told us specifically that 100 to 130 properties were assessed, but actual documentation identified roughly 38. In the 10 pages of documentation that you released of 145, there were several other obvious contradictions as well, like Kemptville having transit that was not only existent, but in fact expanding, which is flatly false. So my question, can you explain why so much discussion about transparency has been conveyed both last November and this November, but we had to file a Freedom of Information request to get accurate numbers regarding the number of properties that were assessed? And why did the Kemptville site not get disqualified as other locations did for not meeting or only partially meeting threshold criteria that you developed? It appears that the requirements you bypassed, it appears that requirements were bypassed or rules are being bent by selecting Kemptville. And we're not sure if that's because we're a small community that everyone thought wouldn't seek the facts and push back on your proposal. But I would like it if you could please comment on that. Thank you.
Absolutely, for sure, and definitely, I appreciate the comment about municipality. So definitely we'll stick to that. In terms of site selection, there are many factors. Some are more important than others, but the really big deciding factors will always be size, proximity to highway, servicing, being a government site already, and not having a dedicated. So I know that you brought up this fact that there were potential uses, but it was still circulated as a government land to be able to for any actual entity to put up their hands to be able to utilize it, not just us. So anyone could have utilized it for any other purpose, for any other government purpose. So government directive to go there, and truly it being zoned institutional was a big factor, and having no land claims as well was a huge factor. I know you brought up transportation, but those other things trump transportation definitely, because as I said before, those things do not allow us to build them. If it's not zoned, it's a very long process, or if there's land claims.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Victor, and then after that, Don and Patricia.
Yes, thank you. I assume you can hear me? Yes.
Yes, we can.
So I guess my question is for you, LD. I don't think the questions are actually being answered, certainly not directly. For example, Lynn's request for the list of sites, you answered by telling us that they were withheld. We already know that. That's why we're asking for the list of sites. Or Chris Wilson's question about the economic benefits. You say you think that they will be there, but he's asking for evidence. So that wasn't responded to. The list of Indigenous groups that were consulted, you say, we can look into it, but you would think that if you consulted them, you would know the list, and you would have it, and you would have read it to us. My question about paving over arable land, you answered by talking about the land that is not being paved over. I'm not talking about that land, I'm talking about the land that you are paving. So you didn't answer my question. You didn't answer Colleen's request for a simple, straightforward acknowledgement that the cost to North Grenville will not be zero. You did say, they won't be major costs. You finally sort of tried to answer, but you didn't give a straightforward answer. You didn't answer Justin Piche's question about what you're going to do about Elizabeth Fry's opposition to the prison, because you talked about where female prisoners will be located. That wasn't an answer. You didn't answer the question about where the staff will come from, because you answered by telling us that it will be a mix of staff with guards and other professional services. The question was, will you undertake to ensure that if you did build this prison, that you will employ local people? So you didn't answer that question. You also keep repeating that this is very early in the process to be talking to people, but I can't imagine, and I don't know how it's possible that you would say that it's in the public good, that what you're doing is in the public good, without having consulted beforehand. How do you know it's in the public good? You haven't asked us. Instead, you're just saying, oh my God, we're doing a great job by talking to you sooner than we usually do. That just means another project. You had no clue what the community wanted, and you claim to know what the public good is. So my question to you, because I see there's a lot of questions still probably remaining, and many that you didn't answer, and there may be more, in a similar manner that Minister Clark committed to meeting with the people of the residents of Kemptville. Will you commit to answering in real time? And by that I mean not in a year's time or not at another engagement session, but if people send you emails, will you commit to answering them in real time?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just make a few points. Absolutely, in terms of getting emails, we want to answer them. We've gotten a few emails from citizens that actually support as well as not, and we try to answer them. So if there's an issue of not answering, definitely you can escalate and reach out to us. In terms of the cost, so I think we've been very definitive in saying that the cost, whether if it's water, sewage, in terms of the expansion or in terms of the ongoing cost, it'll be borne by us. In terms of policing costs, we use Quinte as an example. Right now, they are between 50 and 100 calls, and depending on our facility, we think it'll be under that. And I said, for some reason, if we feel that it's significant, if 10 calls or 20 calls a year out of 365 days result in an increase in policing costs, we're happy to work with you to truly mitigate that cost. We don't want to transfer that cost, but given that we think it'll be a low amount of volume of calls, that's why we think there wouldn't be. In terms of Elizabeth Fry and the facility, there is a reality that we will still have to house offenders. And when we do have to house offenders because the courts deem that we have to house them because they are being given a sentence, then we want to make sure that when we have them, male or female, that they're in a very therapeutic environment. And so I understand Elizabeth Fry and them saying, and Pichet saying that they might walk away, but we have many partners that want to support us because they understand that we are getting the people who the courts deem have to be housed. And so we don't have an ability to say no as an institution. But when they do come here, this is what we're trying to do, is create that modern facility so that they can enjoy their time there as much as possible, be therapeutic, and hopefully reintegrate. The issue of reintegration was also brought in. We've made a huge investment in terms of reintegrating and putting a focus on community reintegration. We are looking at embedding reintegration personnel inside of each institution that we have, so not just in Kemptville, but throughout, so that they can work with the service providers to actually have a fulsome reintegration plan for each and every offender. So that's a huge piece of investment that we're making. We're in the early stages of operationalizing that and launching that, but that's going to be a huge piece in terms of reintegration as well, so that we don't have people coming back.
Okay, thank you. And Ali, you had actually asked I7 to just reiterate who the indigenous groups that we met for last year. We met with 3 different individual groups. We met with the Algonquins of Ontario. We met with the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan community, and we met with the Iroquois Nation. I can't remember exactly which one it was, but they were the 3 groups that we had engagement session with last year.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I7 is the one that helps us with those engagements. And so that's why it was in the tip of my tongue, because they help us lead those engagements. Just in terms of also staff, I don't think I addressed that question. The last time we were here, I believe we showed a heat map of where people that currently work in OCDC, Ottawa, where they reside. And the vast majority actually reside, or 50% of them almost reside, from off the top of my head, south of Ottawa. So they are in that North Grenville catchment or just around the abutting area. So for us, we know that staff live there already. In terms of increasing the staffing and helping recruit, we're happy to do focused recruitments as well in terms of being in North Grenville or the surrounding areas, so that as we're recruiting for this facility, that we're getting local people. So we're happy to take that away and do focused recruitment sessions in the community.
Thank you. So I will go to Dawn Scarrett and then Patricia.
There. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, my concern goes back to the policing costs and what I envision being a burden on the taxpayer. I do appreciate the fact that the facility we're talking in Kemptville will be a newer facility, and due to that, it may reduce some of the calls for service, but that's just speculation. When we actually talk and use Quinte as an example, which I will use Quinte as an example, when you say that all there is in Quinte is 50 to 100 calls per service a year, that is not totally transparent. Not everyone, I think, understands that not all calls for service are billed at the same rate. Because I'm concerned about money, I will speak in dollars. And if the figures that I have are wrong, I would hope that you will correct me. And the figures that I have are actually given to us by the town of Greater Nepean, who bear the cost. And based on their figures, 13% of all the calls for service in 2020 were directly related to policing Quinte. That resulted in a cost to that municipality of $297,000, specifically for policing Quinte. That's a lot of money. Now, I do accept the fact that when you say that you're prepared to sit down with a municipality and try to mitigate their costs, that in fact did happen with the town of Greater Nepean, and what they had based on the new policing model, where they introduced a different class of calls for service called information calls for service, which are non-billable. That allowed them to adjust their bill by $65,000 for 2020. That still left them with a $231,000 bill. So what I would appreciate is, first of all, if my numbers are wrong, please correct me. I think what we need to do when we're talking about concerns about cost, let's speak to dollars. When you talk about 50 to 100 calls for service, that sounds like nothing until you start to realize the different billing rates. It's really more of a comment, other than I think it's important, and I think we need to start using the same metrics. And in the case of when you're talking costs for policing, I think we need to talk in dollars. More of a comment than a question. Again, if my numbers are wrong, please correct me.
No, off the top of my head, I can't say they're wrong or right, but I absolutely take your point in that, obviously 50 to 100 still has a fiscal impact, and we are working to reduce that and mitigate that with all the policing partners. We're also looking at the future with our ministry of how we can continue to mitigate that, and what policies can we bring forward to continue that. We know in Brockville that there isn't a major impact in terms of cost dollar. So we know that every municipality is different depending on the size of facility and depending on the type of facility it is as well. So we know in Brockville there isn't significant. We know in Quinte, as you stated, there is an impact. But with our Kemptville facility, we will work with you. So I think we need to take this and continue to work with you and continue to see what impacts and then see how we can mitigate it. So for sure, this is an important topic that we'll take, and we're hearing it loud and clear that this is something that we need to continue to work with you on.
Yeah, Ali, and the other point is Don talks about the Greater Napanee facility. I think it would be important for us to also look at the Penetangwishing facility, because it has been reported in the local media about that site, and then as well the Brockville site as well. So I think for context, to let people know how many beds are in these facilities, and I think Don's saying to you, if his figures are wrong, correct him. So I think you need to do your due diligence, like I said earlier in my opening comment, that these are valid concerns people are raising, and we need to have some certainty in the community regarding costs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we hope no costs.
And those concerns were reflected formally, as Mr. Vishkini knows, in the most recent letter to the Solicitor General.
Yeah, by me too.
Yeah, absolutely, Your Worship and Minister Clark. In terms of Brockville, St. Lawrence, we know that we have about 150 beds, give or take, between the jail and the St. Lawrence Valley Treatment Center. And we know Penetang is around 1,200. I think 1,180 beds in terms of Penetang. So very different in terms of scope and scale, but I appreciate your comment, Minister Clark.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Patricia and then Wendy, Ruth, and Colleen.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. Thank you also for allowing us to look into the costs associated with policing, considering that we didn't really get consulted about whether we wanted the prison in the first place. It's very kind of you to look into that for us. My other concern about policing possibly is the fact that we're talking about making this a smart prison. So there'll be surveillance cameras, there'll be those things, drones that fly around looking after things, making sure the prisoners stay where they should, enjoying themselves in the prison. I wonder if this extra surveillance available at the prison will have any effect on the community in general. I have read articles about people having their cell phone messages read when they shouldn't have had them read. And I just think security from the point of view of the general public, I don't like the idea of this at all. And I wonder what security issues you're going to put in place to make sure that nobody outside of the prison is going to get impacted by this surveillance.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'll ask Daryl to supplement on this as well. Just in terms of, you talked about cameras and CCT. Our cameras and CCT are really for our perimeter only, and they're small. The CCT cameras, they're not the old box CCT cameras. They're HD and they're small. Obviously, they're throughout on the inside and outside. On our fencing, we also do have just motion sensors, so we don't need to put cameras beyond our fence line. Right, that can actually see into the community or even get close to that buffer zone, because we do have motion sensing just in our fence line. And in terms of drone technology, we don't use drone technology, but what we are doing is that we are moving forward with providing technology in all of our facilities that actually help dispel any drones. So if anyone is using drones, in our facility or goes, so that we dispel it, and so there would be no drones used around us. We don't use them, and we don't want drones to be used, to fly over or around our facilities. Daryl, anything else to add?
Yeah, just add on with respect to looking at people's phones or recording or going into. We have no technology that does that. We don't look into that even in the buildings. That's something we don't look at for technology-wise. Regarding the drone issue, certainly we have drones going around, but Ali pointed out there's technology to detect them coming in, not going out with them outside the facility itself. And the cameras are, again, around in the facility or the very near facility edges, the perimeter, not going outside. They would not be going out looking in the community or outside the building proper of where they need to look for the security of people attending the institution.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Wendy, Ruth, and then Colleen. Wendy, are you able to unmute?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead and hear you.
Hi, thanks. I actually put in a text message too. I was curious as to whether or not there was any other provincial plans besides North Grenville, cross province, that are developing this type of correctional facility.
Sorry to cut out, Daniel. Did you get that full question?
No, sorry. Can you repeat it again, please?
Are there any provincial plans besides the development in North Grenville, the restructuring of the Brockville facility and the Innis facility in the works?
Yeah, thank you for that. So definitely we're modernizing the Brockville and St. Lawrence. We're looking at how to help as well. Quinte, we're building a new facility in Thunder Bay, and we're building 2 new facilities which are rapid construction in Kenora as well. Kenora and Thunder Bay, sorry.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Ruth, Colton, and then Colleen. Go ahead, Ruth.
Bonsoir. En tant qu'une réunion du ministère du procureur général et en regardant l'importance de la langue française, la priorité de votre département d'offrir des services en français et particulièrement l'accès aux droits linguistiques des francophones dans notre province, je poursuis avec ma question dans cette réunion dans une des 2 langues officielles de notre province. Gardant en tête que vous avez la sécurité et la bienveillance des détenus de notre région en tête, j'aimerais savoir comment vous allez assurer la bienveillance et la sécurité des jeunes enfants de notre région et particulièrement du campus de Kemptville. Le fait que vous allez en discuter de ceci dans le futur ne m'indique pas que vous en avez pensé à date. Qu'allez-vous faire?
Okay, so Ali, I'll translate that for you. And Ruth, if I miss something, please feel free to to come back in again. I'm just going to ask you to unmute just in case I don't. But so in following the essence of looking at questions in both official languages, she's asking a question relating to how are you going to ensure the security of our children around the facility. So Ruth, si jamais j'ai pas ciblé la question, sentez-vous à l'aise d'ajouter?
Oui, j'aimerais bien savoir, avec le campus de Kemptville à côté de votre facilité, comment est-ce que vous allez assurer la sécurité des enfants d'un jeune âge de 12 mois jusqu'au la fin du secondaire?
Yeah, so it relates to how are you going to ensure the security of our children ranging from 12 months to high school?
Yeah, thank you for that. Last session, I'll ask Daryl to supplement as well. Last session, we talked about that we have several facilities that are also within the catchment of school areas. I think we used 3 examples where they're within a kilometer range, in some of them even closely abutting. And we've had no significant issues in terms of children. And as we said, we are trying to house these people for the 40 plus or minus days, and then we are transporting them back to their communities. It's our responsibility to transport them back to their communities and not to be discharged from our facility and then have to figure out where they would go. So between the security standards and the high security standards that we have with the buffer zones and being able to use the screening, as well as being able to move the offenders back into their communities, those are the things that we do to protect. And in terms of the examples that we used at the last session in terms of schools, we haven't seen any significant issues with schools being, within that catchment. Daryl?
Thanks, Alex. And I agree. I mean, we've had no issues in the several facilities that are abutting to it, particularly in North Bay with the fence goes in people's back properties. And the school is very close to that institution, as well as OCI in Brandon. Also regarding to the individuals in their care in those facilities, they're brought in secure vehicles to a secure compound into a secure door. Even entering the building, they're escorted by correctional officers at all times, or police if they're going to court if that does ever happen. So they're not going to be outside the door where they can move around the area. They're not going to be outside the facility milling around by any means. They'll be inside the building and not outside the building, so keep security of the institution and will not be around children in the area or members of the public for that.
Thank you. So mindful of everybody's time, I know that there are a number of hands raised, but we will go for 3 more questions. So I will do Colleen, Aaron, and David. So, and we'll do 4 actually with Sarah. For Mary V, Justin P, Che, Albert, I would ask that you please write your questions in the chat, and we will. All the questions in the chat will be forwarded to the Solicitor General to be answered. So we will do 4 more questions, and that will close off the session tonight. So, Colleen, you're up.
Thank you. Yeah, just a very brief comments. In terms of due diligence that Minister Clark mentioned, it's actually very easy. A number of people in the community have, in fact, already done it. We brought the matter, Kirk Albert and I, to the June council meeting where we had a delegation and specifically raised the issue of concern around policing costs. It was very easy because it was in the news. And I can't read anyone's mind, but I'll be honest, Minister Clark, it seemed to me that you were not terribly interested in hearing our concerns in that matter. So I'm very glad that you're now showing that level of interest. Also, in terms of due diligence, Quinte has a capacity of 228, just slightly less than our facility. Penetang is considered a mega prison with, I think, over the capacity around 1,100, but they have been averaging around 800. So the bottom line is that we now have confirmation, which we appreciate, that there will be costs to the property taxpayers for policing. The only other comments I want to quickly make, Kirk Albert, when he spoke, mentioned that he had requested and he had separately requested both Cap and Jog of Minister Clark and Minister Jones that they opt to have a public meeting in person where they could engage with the people of the community around this very critical issue. Mr. Clark, to his credit, did respond to us and indicated that he was not in town today, or couldn't be because he's in the legislature. However, I just want to be very clear, Mr. Clark, when you mentioned that you would have a meeting with us, we're not asking for a meeting with us. We're not wanting to do the tiny, little conference room with 6 stakeholders so you can tick that off your box. We're asking you to come to this community and speak to the folks that you've heard from tonight, the other folks that have been writing to you, the people who have come to the rallies, the people who have written the letters to the editor, and show them that you respect them as your constituents and as residents of this community. And finally, I'd like to say, your comment, Colleen, I know you're very angry at me. Well, I'm very disappointed that you would use that phrase, because what we've seen before is a tendency by men, often powerful men, to discredit women by referring to them as emotional. So if my passion was misinterpreted as anger, you're wrong. I'm not angry. But rumor has it, Mr. Clark, you may be very angry at me, and that's unfortunate. So thank you.
I look forward, Colleen, to having a meeting in the municipality. I'm not angry at anyone. I want to continue to stand up for the residents of Leeds Grenville. I've got a number of projects both in North Grenville and in Brockville that I think do have a number of positives for the community, and I've taken copious notes, and I will provide answers, and I will continue to advocate to the Ministry of Solicitor General and other ministries to provide the answers in the community, as I said at the council meeting that I attended.
Aaron Doyle.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I'm a professor of sociology and criminology at Carleton. First, I just want to say, in your opening presentation, it talked about a positive effect on real estate values, and I have a study sitting here on my desk of 200 towns where prisons were built. It's a study by an economics professor, which showed that real estate prices decreased by 2 to 4% in the areas close to the prison. My main question goes to Minister Clark's point about the need for more specifics. So you've got this very expensive 235 bed prison, which we're hearing is very unpopular with people in Kemptville. You refer to capacity pressures in the eastern region and regional trends. As a justification for the need for this prison, the province was able to reduce Ontario's prison population by 30% during the pandemic. And the Ontario government has also promised many times to reduce the population of remanded prisoners and has brought in numerous measures to do that. So to provide a more functional bail system and reduce court delays, and that should reduce capacity pressures in the region a lot. Are you expecting that those measures that your government brought in are going to work? This prison is likely to cost more than $250 million just to build. And so given the massive cost, do you have numbers to show the capacity pressures and regional trends you refer to? And can you make those numbers public, as I asked at an engagement session a year ago? And if not, why not?
Thank you for that question. Ali's computer unfortunately gone down. I will take a lot of those for you. With regards to the trends of the capacity issues, we'll come back to you on that. We'll get back. There has been certain stages at the start of the pandemic. Our population certainly dropped down by a large number from approximately 8,000 to 5,500. But during that time with the court pressures and some of the backlog on, we're up to nearly 7,700 inmates in our custody right now. So we will look at that and get back to you, look at those documents for consideration. We'll respond. With regards to the real estate concerns, duly noted, certainly we appreciate that, and we will look into that as well. Not familiar with the study you have, sir, but we will respond to those, and thank you for that question.
Yeah, Daryl, thanks. I came back on my phone for some reason. My computer overheated. Just in terms of property, we have other facilities where residential development is happening right abutting our property, and other ones where the properties that have been there for a long time. I don't think we've got ever a complaint in terms of property costs. In terms of managing capacity and being able to building this in terms of managing our capacity in the future. Everything that we've said before and today, yes, we do want to manage our capacity pressures, understandably, but that's not why we're building this facility, or the main reason why we're building this facility. The main reason is to provide that therapeutic environment, the human environment. If we were trying to manage capacity, we wouldn't be building single cell accommodations. We wouldn't be building day rooms that are as big and are as expansive. We wouldn't be building program rooms and outdoor space for them to be able to enjoy. So I think in terms of trying to build a narrative that this is about capacity, I think that narrative is false.
Thank you. We'll go to David and then Sarah to hold off questions.
Thank you. It's a lot of questions, more questions that seem to be able to be answered in this session. We still have hands up and we've gone over already. And there are a lot of important questions, and I do appreciate that you've taken notes and you're looking at addressing it. But to me, it begs the question is, why not put a hold on the project while those questions get answered? Because the whole point of today's session is to have engagement and try to get the community on board with it. And part of that is answering their questions and dealing with their concerns. But as you can see today, there's a lot of concerns, and there's a lot of serious concerns, and we don't have a lot of clear answers. So it's very hard as a community to know what the impact of this project will be on the community, other than simply, a jail popping up in the middle of the town. There's issues of costs, of policing costs, of transportation, real estate values that may get affected. Could we not put this on hold and do a more robust consultation where everybody's questions can get answered in a transparent manner? So we look before we leap. Would you consider putting a moratorium on this project while the consultation took place?
I think in terms of moving forward for us, we've already started our site due diligence, obviously for all the reasons that I said before in terms of the site selection. There's reason why we're coming to this site, because we can build there in an expedited manner. We've been trying to find this build this modernized facility for many years now. But in terms of policing costs, I definitely hear that that's an issue, and we are going to take that back and be serious about our response with policing costs, because we heard you today, absolutely. And in terms of the other partners that we work with, whether if it's a hospital or school boards or the municipality, we're trying to blend. We're trying to be a partner. We're trying to, support them in what they're doing while also supporting us in our agenda as well. So as a partner, we're trying to be 50-50 in terms of that. I appreciate though the comments and the sentiments, but we're trying to be that partner and be 50-50 as we are building it there.
And our last question is Sarah Bowie, and I know that there was another Sarah that lifted your hand. Could you please write your question in the chat so that the Solicitor General can answer it? Thank you. So Sarah Bowie. Sarah Bowie, are you there?
Sarah Bowie, are you still with us? Maybe she's left. Just looking to see.
Yeah, she must have left.
Yeah, she was there for the longest time.
Oh, no, she's back. She's back. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
There we
you're
go.
muted.
No, I just asked her to unmute. Okay, go ahead, Sarah.
Perfect. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it. So my question is about expansion. Out of the existing Ontario correctional complexes, so the ones that are pre-existing, as of say how many have expanded their size and capacity beyond what was originally proposed by SolGen. And I guess another like kind of addition to that is we know that solid waste in these facilities can be an issue. So do we ever add water and sewer treatment plants to these complexes?
Yeah, two great questions. So the first one I'll ask Dale to supplement as well. In terms of expansion, the only facilities that I know that we're looking, to help with expansion to Quinte, definitely, but that's it within inside the secured fencing area. And the other expansion projects that we've done are probably a long time ago. I don't think in the last decade or even 2 decades we've done major expansion projects. I don't think we've done major expansion projects that ever go outside of our fencing area as well in the last few decades. Because if we're going to expand, we want to expand within our secured fence. We don't want to move. We don't want to move, but that's something we can definitely look in as well. Because I only have 10 years of history. But so Daryl, I don't know if you remember beyond the kind of 10 years.
Yeah, I can add in, Allie. I've got about 35 years, and the only one that is the consideration would be the Quinte, and that's just the expansion that's currently being contemplated. But nothing in Brockville OCDC in the last at least 20 years, and St. Lawrence is where it is right now.
Yeah, and we're doing new projects in Kenora and Thunder Bay, but those are net new assets. They're not necessarily expansion. They're a net new asset to help modernize those facilities as well.
Okay, thank you. So those of you that unfortunately couldn't get to their verbal questions, please ensure that you put them in the chat. And if you can just go to the last page of the presentation before I ask closing remarks from Ali. Someone raised a question. There is an email. It came in the chat. If you look at the right-hand side of the slide, there is the email where you can get in touch with the Solicitor General. So solgen.correspondence@ontario.ca. So I can't remember who asked the question about the email, but there is the email. So I would like to invite Ali to close off our session, but I want to thank all of you. I know there's a lot of frustration with this project and that, and everybody was very respectful, and I want to thank you. It makes my job as a facilitator much easier, so I want to thank all of you for that, and I'll hand it over to Al.
Yeah, thank you for that, Danielle, and I appreciate the community being out here, and I appreciate some of the comments that are made. We will definitely take some of the important issues back in terms of policing costs. We'll definitely take some of the important issues back in terms of service providers and working with them to make sure that they're embedded and that they can come and that they're funded. So issues like that we will definitely take back and take very seriously. Also, just in terms of being able to be more definitive about the water sewage, we said it that we're definitely paying for it ourselves, the one-time cost of building, designing, but also the ongoing. So we'll look at really crystallizing that as well, so that the municipality feels comfortable in that commitment as well. So issues like that we will definitely take back as well. But I thank you for your time. I know we went over time, but there were a lot of questions, and I want to make sure that we try to get to as many as possible.
Thanks, everyone. We appreciate it. Thank you, Ali.
Thanks,
you,
everybody.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Diddy, all the best.
Thank you.
Have a safe evening. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I'm stopping the meeting.